and a hatred that always was. And now, the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you. Final Fantasy VII.
PlayStation.
This is a video that I've been dying to make for a while. I always love the topic of story in video games because this is something that everyone has a different opinion on. Now, video games have obviously evolved throughout the years. I mean, when you really look back, we went from games like Pong to games like Baldur's Gate 3. But that is what I love about video games. It is an ever-changing media that evolves with time. But let's focus on the main topic at hand. Does story matter in video games? Now, if you want the short answer, it depends on the game. Alright, bye-bye! But if you want the more detailed answer, go grab some food, get something to drink, because there is a lot to talk about. Now, the easiest way to determine whether or not story matters in video games is to break this down into 3 categories. So let's start with the first category. This category focuses on games where the fundamentals are solely focused on the gameplay itself. I would like to call this category of games the gamers. I'm not good with names. Now, if you want some examples of what games would be in this category, it would be Dark Souls, Crash Bandicoot, every Mario game, like the majority of 2D retro games, and so on. In this category, story does not matter for these games because the narrative of these stories, if they even have one, are completely told through the gameplay. Now, some of the games in this category do have good stories, but the point I'm trying to make here is that regardless of whether or not a game in this category has good story, you do not lose or gain anything from the enjoyment of the game. Where in the other 2 categories, you can most certainly lose or gain something if the story is bad. And this is where we get to the second category. This category focuses on the games that blends the elements of stories and games together. I would like to call this category story games. Now, if you want some examples of what games would be in this category, it would honestly be the majority of modern day games. The Last of Us, Uncharted, God of War, PS4, Marvel's Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure you get the picture. Now, in the gamers category, story mattered 0%, but in the story games category, it is 50% game, 50% story. And I don't even mean that in length. I mean that simply based on enjoyment. While the story doesn't make or break in this category, it most certainly can change your enjoyment of the game. The absolute best example of this is The Last of Us Part 2. Now, I'm not about to give my personal thoughts on the game just yet because I will save that for a very lengthy review. I'm just gonna use this game as an example. This is the best example when it comes to story games because the main problem people had with this game was the story. And this is when the gamers start to argue, oh, why do you hate the game because the story is bad? Isn't the whole point of a video game supposed to be the game itself? All right, let me explain it so your dumbass can understand. Story games are not just games. They are playable long-form movies. How can you argue that stories shouldn't matter when there are over 10 hours worth of cutscenes in this game? That is longer than the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And honestly, the length of the cutscene doesn't even matter to me. The moment a game becomes a story game comes down to the importance of the narrative. Is the narrative being told through both the gameplay and the story? Here's a great example. I think that the first Jak and Daxter game would be in the gamers category, while Jak 2 and Jak 3 would be in the story game category because the narrative is told a lot more through the story. And you might not think that this is a big deal, but let me give you the best example of how a story can influence a person's gameplay. The greatest example that can show the difference between a game and a story game, I really need to change these names, is when you get to the halfway point of The Last of Us Part 2, and you have to play as Abby. Now, if this game was in the gamers category, no one would care, because if the narrative was told through the gameplay, there would be no reason for anyone to hate this character. But because this is a story game where a specific scene happens with Abby that pissed players off, oh, the players did not want to play this bitch.
I don't want to play as this bitch. 4 years earlier. Oh, I don't want to play as her.
Dad! What?
This way.
Pull out your gun. Pull out your gun. Pull out your gun and shoot yourself in the fucking head, please. I'm about to get multiple deaths. I'm about to die multiple times here. I just hope you know that, because I just want to see it happen to her.
10 hours of Abby? 10?
Mel's pregnant.
Wait, what? Is that real? No joke, 10 hours with this character.
But if you truly think that story doesn't matter in video games, then let me introduce you to the final category. This category focuses on games that completely build their narrative through the story. I would like to call this category of games the storytellers. If the story is bad and your game is in this category, you have fucked up your game, because the story matters far more than the gameplay in these games. And if you've been paying attention, some of you might already have some ideas of what games would be in this category. Life is Strange, Heavy Rain, The Wolf Among Us, every Telltale's game, the list goes on. Now, you do need good gameplay to make these games work, especially when there's other mechanics than just the choice-based dialogue like Max's Rewind Power and Life is Strange. But if your story sucks, then the gameplay doesn't even matter, because no one's going to play the game. In this category, the game revolves around the story, and it will make or break your game if you fail to deliver. Now, in conclusion, there are many different types of video games that are told through many different narratives. And as long as we can understand that, then we can all agree that stories in MMOs suck.